Would you guys say, though, that because we are all children that come of a certain age, of a certain awareness in the 80s during the Satanic Panic, all of us are fans of a certain type of music that definitely used a lot of demonic themes?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We also come of age in a time where horror movies are being overproduced on this level that maybe I don't even think today can catch up with what we got out of the 80s in the video and straight to cable era. Does that make a difference in the way you view these films, the cultural moment of the 80s?
Because of overexposure, basically, as a kid. Because once the video store world came in, right, I was sitting there, I'm looking at these Hammer horror films, I'm looking at Mario Bava, I'm looking at like all this stuff, because it opened up a world of film to in a populist way to people that didn't have that ability before. Not everybody had like a cinema that would show older stuff, and the grindhouse stuff. It's just like, oh, it's real cheap to make these movies. You can ply your trade as a filmmaker, even if it's not your genre of choice. And frankly, there was a lot of really good ones. There was also a lot of really terrible ones because people got some attachment to the genre by looking at the outliers and the progenitors, the paragons of the genre, if you will, and then got used to the filmmaking trademarks of things that you would see in certain beats of the story. And then they started to accept and then venerate like the sequels and these knockoffs that frankly aren't very good. And it's weird to me because most people that are quote unquote into horror don't approach it from that perspective. But me and my friend, the dearly departed Clay, my best friend for many years, we had a thing where we would go to the video store, we'd pick out the best horror movie that we could find, the one that looked the coolest and the best, and we would also pick out the worst one, like the one that just like that looks horrid. And his theory that I enabled was we would watch the horrible one first, and then it would make the good one seem even better. So I saw a lot of drivel, just trash from the trash can horror films over the years because of this motif. But I also saw some really amazing ones, and then that actually led me to kind of think more critically about not just that genre but film in general, which led me to be on a movie podcast today.
There you
Congratulations. Go. I just logged my 1,000th film on Letterboxd last night.
Wow.
And I've only been on since 2020, so take that, nerds.
Don't tell John Carpenter.
Well, Jason, to your point about the 80s, I mean, I think one element of the story, and this certainly relates to the Satanic Panic point, is that, you know, the Catholic Church, and I'm sure this is true for Protestants as well, but it's certainly true of Christianity, I think broadly, kind of moves away from notions of evil as the product of human beings, right? Yeah. Like after World War II, maybe even with the Great Depression, evil is really in the realm of human contrivance. When you get to the era of neoliberalism, though, we move away from evil as a product of human beings, right? And a lack of empathy or compassion for each other. Because how could that be evil if neoliberalism insists that rich people get socialism and everyone else gets social Darwinism? And instead, what we have is the notion of evil as inhuman, right? Which works well. It's basically the theme that drives Exorcism films and the like.
Ooh, see,
that's a great point.
I told you that's why he's on here.
Well, and to tag that, just recently, I watched my 1,000th movie was A Woman in the Dunes, which is a really cool artsy Japanese film that, like many films around that time, is talking about reconstruction of like the whole Japanese ethos, what it means to be Japanese, and has like one of the best analogies for capitalism ever, because they're in these dunes. And they're digging up these dirt for these villagers so they can sell for cement, but they're stuck and conscripted to do it, right? Yeah. And there it's like Sisyphus. It's never going to be enough. You're never going to be done. The boulder's going to keep rolling down the hill. Dunes are still going to keep collapsing on you, and it's done so well and so artfully. But it's one of many movies around that time that really all of them are around that, World War II era reconstruction of what it means to be Japanese and like what kind of stories we tell to ourselves for like a country that ultimately was ruined by this war. And I find it fascinating being more into world cinema these days and exploring that aspect of seeing not just the American perspective, but everyone else as well, because it wasn't just us. But I think that is dead on it becomes like, look at David Lynch, right? The God of Light episode of like the Twin Peaks: The Return, which really is a big analogy to like evil has to come from somewhere else. Something this bad cannot come from humans. There's no way. Or at least that's the story that we like to tell ourselves, because absolutely it can. But